Okay, so thank you so much for being here today. My name is Cassie Reddick. I am the archivist for the college and for the Sisters of Providence, and I'm going to be introducing to you St. Mary of the Woods Archives. St. Mary of the Woods Archives is the combined repository for the sisters and the college. So we preserve material with enduring administrative, historical, and legal value for both institutions. The sisters have had some type of archives since Mother Theodore's time. They have been long preserving materials. However, formal archiving is very new for the college. And what the two institutions discovered is that their histories were too interconnected for the archives to be operating separately. So as a result, they decided to recombine their archives into St. Mary of the Woods archives. What this means is that we have to rethink how the sisters' existing archives is organized in order to accommodate the college's brand new formal archives. So we are redeveloping their organization, how things are located, the discovery tools for both institutions, and we are developing new policies and procedures for both. This is a very long process, and it will be probably another year before we are completely done with this. And completely is a vague term at this point. So the records that we preserve include Mother Theodore's letters and journals, anything related to her canonization and her ongoing legacy, the history of the sisters in the area, which is also, of course, the history of the college. We get a lot of questions about where original buildings used to be in the past. So for these types of information in the past, we have had to rely heavily on sketches and on written explanations of descriptions and where things were located, because the sisters pretty much predate easy access to photography materials. It wasn't until the 1880s that photography became essentially easily portable. And so between 1840 and this period, that is a very long span of time in which we have essentially only sketches and written material to help us discover what things used to look like and where things were. Around the 1920s is when we see photography really pick up around here. We have a lot of photographs, thousands of photographs. And my favorite thing about the photography is that it gives us a glimpse into the day-to-day minutia more than written documentation does. It is very, very common in archives for there to be a focus on the quote unquote important aspects that happen, notable aspects. And the minutia of day-to-day life tends to be just assumed that everybody will remember what this is like because everybody does it every day. And then we fast forward 100 or more years and nobody remembers how things were day to day. We see these more often in photographs than we do written down because of the minutia, the presumed minutia of this. We also preserve materials regarding the sisters' past and current missions. This one is, of course, a past mission, since that's President Reagan, and that is one of the sisters who used to teach. We preserve committee records for both the sisters and for the college. Anytime there is a significant event that occurs at either institution, we should be receiving records about that decision. For example, this is essentially the creation of the Sisters White Violet Center. We preserve some historic student material. We do not preserve modern student material because of privacy concerns. This is actually a sister's herbarium, not a student, but we do have some student herbariums. Herbariums are very, very, very delicate and they do not really survive. This was the cleanest page that I could find. But we also have a wide range of publications. We have all of the Auroras, all of the student newspapers, yearbooks. We have any alumni newsletters that the sisters sent out, whether locally or to their broader missions and anyone interested in their operation. And we have some college memorabilia. This is an old academy uniform from the late 1800s, early 1900s. We have one also from the 1920s, and we have some athletic wear as well. We do not tend to preserve a whole lot of clothing because we don't have the space for it. But if it is historically relevant, we will keep it. We also have some sister habits. Since they no longer wear habits, it's very historically relevant. But the college memorabilia is a very sparsed out and wide-ranging collection of materials. We have freshman beanies from the 50s and the 60s. I think we have some that go into the 70s, and that's not something that anybody sees anymore, but that was a practice for a bit of time. So we have some of those as well. We also have things that you wouldn't expect us to have. Our collections are dedicated to this area. So it's dedicated to the sisters and it's dedicated to the college. So you will not find us preserving materials for a far-flung institution, but you really don't know what we have until you ask, because there are things that we have discovered while we are answering reference questions that we wouldn't have even remotely thought to ask about or to consider that we had. I did not know, for example, that some of the buildings on campus were fallout shelters during the Cold War until I was pulling together something for a presentation. Every picture that I have on this slide exists because somebody asked about it. So that's how we discover things. We discover things because people ask us about them. And that is what we enjoy doing. That's why we are here. We love finding things. And so we never know what fun things we are going to find until people ask us about that. So in relation to that, currently the only way to discover archival materials is to ask us. We do ask that you contact us with a research question at least 2 weeks before you need an answer. Not 2 weeks before it's due, but 2 weeks before you need an answer. And the reason for this is because we have to physically check for these materials. We have our own internal finding aids to discover materials, but we then need to go in to see if we have the material that you are looking for. There is also very, very commonly a back and forth. So we will come back with an answer and then you will fine tune your question and we will have to dive back in. So we do very, very highly suggest 2 weeks, if not more. And this is also because we have a queue. We have a reference question going at any given moment. As I said, we don't currently have any method for people to discover these materials on their own yet. We are currently working on this, but this is a very long process. It's going to be several months, if not a year, before we have this up and running. When it comes to getting the materials to you, if it's a quote unquote reasonable amount, we will scan these records for you and send it to you by email. Reasonable varies. We will have a whole wide range of materials that we will need to send to people, photographs, documents, but in general, reasonable tends to be about 10 pages. If what you are asking for exceeds 10 pages, or if it's too big or delicate or three-dimensional to scan, you will have to actually come here to the archives to review these materials in person. So if you do need to visit the archives for research, we ask that you give us at least 3 business days warning. And this is presuming that you've already had a conversation with us and have determined that we do have these materials. If that hasn't happened yet, it will need to be at least 2 weeks so that we can do that back and forth to ensure we have these materials. But when it comes to actually setting up a plan to visit, we do ask for 3 business days. This is so we can ensure that somebody will be available for you, that we have the material and can pull it out for you and have it ready. Archives personnel must be with you when you are going through archival material. This is for your safety and for the safety of the archival material. What you will find when you go through our records, that it is very common for our materials to be kept together with straight pins. And to keep you from getting poked by those, we ask you to give us to those so that we can remove it safely, so that you don't get hurt and so that the materials themselves don't get hurt. The same thing with anything with staples. So we have to be there to help you out, as well as to make sure the material is preserved to the best of our ability. We do also ask that researchers sign an agreement form that says you will abide by our policies and restrictions when it comes to handling materials. And you get to read all about that when you visit. It is very exhilarating information. If you are a faculty person and you are wondering if you can create a class assignment with archival materials, yes, please. We welcome students here and we encourage the use of primary source material. Our whole existence is to provide primary source material to researchers. Archives are there to hold people accountable for their decisions that they make, and also to preserve these records. And if it's not being used, then it kind of, we're not fully embracing our purpose of life here in the archives. So we highly, highly encourage use of primary source materials. It is also extremely important to me that students learn how to use and to interpret primary source material. So we do encourage assignments. However, students are researchers and they do have to abide by the same policies that we require any researchers to abide by when they are handling our materials. And so we have the same restrictions for students that we do for any external or internal researcher. We also have to limit the number of people who are allowed in the archives at once. We just don't have the space for it. And so we cannot accommodate entire classes in the archives at once. However, there is always a method of accommodating these types of things. You can just contact me and we will form a plan to make this possible for your assignment. It just might involve some creativity. So if you or your students want to come here to use archival materials, we do have restrictions about how these things are handled. You will see in a lot of movies and television shows that they don these white cotton gloves and, very carefully handle books. And it's not necessarily how we do things in modern archiving. In modern archiving, it is extremely important to make sure hands are clean and very, very dry, but we do not wear cotton or nitrile gloves when handling paper materials or books, unless otherwise directed. The reason being is that you lose the tactile function of your fingertips when they're covered in gloves, and you are more likely to tear pages. So we do not wear gloves when we handle books or papers, but we do wear gloves when we're handling photographs, metal, wood, ivory, silk, things like that. No food or drink is allowed in the archives, and of course, no smoking or vaping around any of the materials. We also do not allow, of course, writing, highlighting, sticky notes, or tape on the materials. One thing that I am very particular about is, since we do not wear gloves when handling paper materials or books, please resist the impulse to lick your finger in order to turn pages. That is a very big no-no in archiving. One of the reasons why archives do require people to wear gloves if they handle books is sometimes, this is not the case in archives, in our archives, but sometimes books are made with toxic materials. So not only might you damage the material by putting your saliva on it, you might be consuming toxic materials if you are licking your fingers. We have yet to find any books made with toxic materials in our archives, but it's better to be safe than sorry. So we have so far been talking about using the archives, but you might be asking, what if I want to donate materials to the archives? So the archives preserves records from any person or department within, associated with, or sponsored by the college or sisters. But what I have underlined here is the most important part: in service to their missions. We do not preserve personal materials. It has to be related to the mission of the college or the sisters. And as I said earlier, very briefly, we don't accept student records or student schoolwork due to privacy restrictions. There are laws about this that make this a little bit more difficult that we abide by here in the archives. We are also, of course, limited by our space and our policy restrictions. I mentioned that we are currently writing new policies and procedures for the archives, and this is a part of it. We have restrictions about what we can and cannot accept because it has to be, as I said earlier, in service to our mission. But the biggest indicator of whether we can or cannot accept something tends to be space. Space is extremely finite, both physical and digital, and we have to be very careful about the materials that we bring in. As I said earlier, we don't tend to accept a lot of clothing because we just do not have the space for it. Clothing has to be padded to prevent damage when things are folded up. And so it takes quite large boxes to make sure that they are safely taken care of. So space restrictions are one of the biggest indicators about what we can and cannot accept. And all donations have to be accompanied by a transfer or a donor agreement form. Transfer agreements are for internal donations between departments to us, and then donor agreements are from, say, alumni to us. And that says, I give you this, and you can do whatever you want with it. And that will allow us to digitize it if we need to, or to do whatever we need to preserve the material. So finally, you may be wondering as well, may I just come by and see something for fun? And it depends on what it is. Some things are very, very delicate, and we won't take them out. For example, we have Mother Theodore's daguerreotype, and it had been on display for such a long time that it is starting to disappear. And so that does not come out anymore because of that. And that's the case with a number of things that we have. They're just too delicate to be handled, and so they won't come out. However, there are some things we love showing off, and there are some things we're very excited about sharing. And so just feel free to ask if there is something that strikes your fancy, whether or not it's related to your research, or if it's a hobby, or if you're not quite sure if there's enough for you to do any type of project or research on, just ask. And we are always happy to take a look to see what we have and to schedule a time for you to come down and take a look. One of the things that I think tends to prevent people from coming into archives is the expected formality of it. We do, of course, have restrictions, such as we have to have appointments and people have to be careful when they're handling, but we love research. It is the reason why we're here. We get just as excited about discovering things as you do. And so nothing is too silly to research. We get a lot of questions that just are super wide ranging. We get people researching for fiction books, nonfiction books, a lot of genealogical research, people who have hobbies and just interests. Everybody's welcome here. As long as you take care of the material that you are handling to preserve our connected history, we are absolutely welcome, or absolutely happy to share all of what we have here with you. So ask, and we probably have something that will strike your fancy. So to contact us, we are located in the basement of Rooney Center in room 001. That's my office. Or you may email us at archives, and that's archives with an S, at smwc.edu. And that will get an email to us that we will be able to connect to you by email, or you can pop down if you have a question that you want to ask me. As I said multiple times, to see anything, you will have to make an appointment so that we can be sure that we have it and to pull it out. But other than that, we are quite friendly. We just don't tend to see a lot of people because we have to protect the materials from the outside world so we don't get windows. alas. But you are still welcome to come visit us. And so that is the end of my presentation.